G'day guys, goeiedag, hoe gaan dit? And kia ora. Boys, I've been shaking. I was literally shaking watching this game. This was so painful, and in so many different ways. I'm a neutral, and when the All Blacks were under the pumps, it was like, I feel like I wanted to puke. Every time there's a scrum, I just wanted to puke. And then the Springboks at the end was struggling to regain momentum and just under the pumps, and I felt like puking again as well for the Springboks. Boys, this is rugby. This was so good. I enjoyed it so much, and I'm sure if you're South African, commiserations. This was, look, I don't hate either teams, so if any criticism that I'm gonna say in this video, it's not levied against your team. The reason I criticize your team, if any, is to try to encourage the teams to get better. Is to try to get the teams to be more competitive, especially, going into the Rugby World Cup, because I want the Southerner teams to dominate the world of rugby. Okay, I don't want the Northerners to just, throw their arrogance at us. And I think there's so much to learn from a game like this, whether you win or lose. There's so much valuable experience, even from a loss, that, you can walk away from this feeling comfortable that both teams came out of this game better than before they went into it. And that, in my opinion, as a neutral, is the most important part out of this game. Okay? So we're going to talk about the All Blacks first, because the All Blacks, I've been following all these players since Super Rugby. And let me tell you, when this team came out from Razor, the team was demoralized. Demoralized. There was talks that false accusation that apparently Ardie Savea was unhappy about the coaching, which was not true, to go into that first test against the French B team, right? The B team, French B team, where the All Blacks barely scraped out a win, to building every week, building that confidence, building that combination, changing out new players, taking on some more risk, and then building against the Springbok club teams come into this game. And boy, the most impressive part of this All Blacks team is the fact that they got absolutely dominated in the first half for probably the first 50 minutes. And somehow the players got themselves together. They did not give up. They stayed resilient, and they really showed the spirit of being an All Black that I don't think I've seen for quite some time. I'm sorry. This sort of performance is something that you see from like the Richie McCaw era, to dig yourself out of just immense pressure, absolutely immense pressure against the world champions in front of an absolute hostile crowd in altitude. That was so good, and that was a win that's desperately needed for the New Zealand fans and the All Blacks. They were just like, I was seriously worried that they were just gonna go, like, start, become just, one of those average teams and never was able to bounce back. And this was the bounce back that everybody really needed to do. And this is probably, one of the losses that the Springboks really need. And this is good for the Springboks, because they have been just not really challenged at all in July. I'm sorry, but, England, Wales, and Scotland weren't really much challenges. Even Argentina, Argentina put on much better fight than the other teams. There weren't really that much of a threat in terms of toppling the Springboks. And you can see that the Springboks has some consistency issues. I pointed out in the Argentinian team, they have some consistency issues. And then you can see that despite the dominance in the scrummaging, despite the military style of rugby that was so brutal, so clinical at times, they weren't able to execute to get those tries. And I think, and I talk about this a lot, that second penalty goal, in the penalty goal the last penalty goal they kicked, the only 3 points they scored in the second half, where they relinquish the massive momentum that was going for them. That was the mistake that cost the Springboks, and that is something that you can't get away with against a team like Wales or England or Scotland, but against a true world class team like the All Blacks, like the French, maybe even the Irish. You are not going to get away with that. You need to sustain the pressure. And the All Blacks actually showed in the end of the game how to manage clock, how to control the game, right? You could hear if you watch the South African commentary. One of the guy was like, "Oh, you probably should take 3 here because you got 2 yellow cards." We'll talk about the referee in a minute. 2 yellow cards, take the 3, and then to put yourself out of reach. But the All Blacks just kept the scrum. They weren't in a rush to kick the 3 points because they knew they could score the try. But more importantly, they knew if they control the ball, if they control the momentum, and if they are inside your 22, they're controlling the clock. Most importantly, something that a lot of teams don't seem, including the commentary. I'm sorry, I'm not disrespecting them. Failed to, didn't quite see that importance. Controlling the clock really was the most important part, more important than taking the 3 points. And that was, how the clock was managed appropriately by the All Blacks. And not only that, they did back themselves to score a try, but they ran the clock down like 5 minutes. And that's 5 minutes the Springboks could not score at all and have to scramble in front of the goal line, and with the yellow card pressures building for a third potential yellow card coming up. So that was just, the two teams when it comes to taking those penalty approaches. Again, I think that the Springboks was able to get away with it against lesser teams, and I think that in these games where the momentum is in your side, really have to capitalize more than 3. You need to utilize that to get more than 3 before you actually take before you actually decide, hey, we really have to take the 3. When it's basically your final option, especially considering how dominant you are in the scrum and how dominant you are in the maul. I thought it was a lost opportunity. And in fact, I'm pretty sure this was the 3 points of the Springbok taken was definitely a mistake because they substituted the props on. Usually the Springboks, when they get a penalty, they put the props on, they immediately either go for a scrum or go for the line out maul because they want to utilize the fresh legs in an immediate attacking set piece. And the Springboks decided to take 3. And that, in my opinion, was a mistake. In fact, I'm pretty sure that was a mistake because there's no way Rassi would put new fresh props on for you to just take 3 points, having just sitting there do nothing. I'm pretty sure that's a mistake. And and I think that's a mistake, a very, very costly one for the Springboks. That is probably the best example that 3 points is sometimes worth less than the territory and the momentum that you relinquish as a result of taking it. So with that being said, let's look at some the referee that we'll talk about scrum in a minute. Talk about the referee first, right? So there are some few interesting. This is probably the biggest turning point that probably just closed, end of the game for the Springboks. So Ardie Savea went for a tackle. The referee said that Ardie Savea's made contact shoulder to shoulder first, and it's the whiplash from the contact from Jasper Wiese, who's been, I think he's man of match with Jasper Wiese. He's been so good for me. Wiese whiplash his head from the shoulder contact into Ardie's shoulder. So let's see if that is true on slow motion. You can see Ardie's shoulder coming up. Initial contact. That's his collar. On the collar, potentially you could say that's a little bit on the neck. You can see a little bit of the collar here. You could potentially argue that's a little bit on the head, on the neck maybe. And then it's the whiplash that head hits the shoulder. So the whiplash is correct. I think that the referee made, this is a tough call, but I think that you could argue that potentially that could have been a penalty, if not a yellow card for Ardie Savea. So that is a tough call. And then next one, we've got the play. And then that just, with that going out of the way, there was a cynical play coming to this where the Royga comes in to take the ball and you cannot play the 9 in the ruck. Now, the Nika Ashuma Kelly came in and actually pointed at this and said this was in general play. This was not a ruck. So the referee overruled Nika's decision on the sideline based on this review. So that was another yellow card that really cost the Springboks. And then there was a deliberate knock on immediately, resulting in Reinach getting sent off immediately as he just came onto the field. So 2 yellow cards in this literally like a minute, and that basically spelled the end for the Springboks. So yeah, so that's let me know your thoughts. I think that is just such a fine line between some of these decisions, and yeah, I think that is something that I guess you can't leave these decisions in the hands of the referee. And I think that, it is what it is. I think overall the referee has been quite good. I think it's been quite decent and it's been quite clear. And these decisions will be scrutinized, by everybody after the game for sure. Now I want to talk about the scrummaging because I do love the scrum. This first scrum took 16 minutes. I mean, come on, just drop the ball, kick the ball out on the full front and the kickoff and have a scrum right away, please. Like next time, please. But anyway, this was so interesting as well. When Enche was on the field, the Springboks absolutely dominated the scrum. There's more of a dynamic, I will call it like a wrestle, maybe a wobble for the Springboks. They kind of like, if you're a wrestler, you will know what I'm talking about. People, when they wrestle, it's not just a pushing game in wrestling. It's a push and pull. You try to do a bit of push and pull, and then you kind of try to time a little bit of a momentum from the opponent, and you do the arm drag, or maybe you do the push to try to get the takedown. And that's what you better see here. And it's just so good, so beautiful in the scrummaging. And once Enche came off, they didn't really have that anymore, the Springboks, unfortunately. And the All Blacks was able to regain control in the scrummaging in the second half. So let's watch this. See how they almost overextended. The All Blacks could probably just walk backwards from here and could go to the penalty because they almost like overextended here for the Springboks. But you watch this pullback. See that pullback? And then that dip, the pullback, the dip and push. That's what really got the All Blacks dominated for the majority of the first half. There was 3 tied head wins against the All Blacks. Sorry, 3 tied head against the All Blacks. So 3 tied head wins for the Springboks there. This is the one where the Springboks lost, and this is where the All Blacks did really well to hold up one side, and the Springboks wheeled the scrum illegally. And this is something that that is, a lot of people don't understand. It looked like the Springboks had the dominance, but the rule is that you cannot wheel the scrum until both sides of the scrum has marched forward. And depends on the referee. Some referee wants you to march forward quite substantially, a couple of steps, before you can wheel the scrum. Otherwise, you'll be considered a boring in. And that's what we're seeing here. Again, I think, first of all, this is the right idea for the Springboks. This is 100% right idea to go for the scrum. Some people might say, oh, they shouldn't have taken the 3, not gone to the scrum. Should have gone to the scrum. Because the All Blacks had a HIA for Ethan de Groot. And very early in the game. And what's his name? George, is it George? What's his name? But anyway, the loose air prop has been playing for the whole game. And if he gets sent off with a yellow card, it's a double send-off because the scrum will have to go to uncontested. And if scrum goes to uncontested, the team that initiates the uncontested scrum loses an additional player. So the All Blacks will have to play with 14 players, right? Even if the yellow card comes back, we'll have to play with 14 players for the remainder of the game because of uncontested scrum. So that's what the Springboks are going for here. They wanted to get him, what's his name? We'll have a look at this right now. Yeah, George Bauer. Yeah, George Bauer. To try to get George Bauer sent off because they won't have another loose set prop and then get that uncontested scrum penalty, essentially, the 2 send-off in 1 yellow card, essentially. So that's what they're going for. So I understand the idea, but if you watch this play, the All Blacks held really good on the loose air side. You could probably say that he's born in, but the referee, because the Springboks, the Springboks also walked around on the other side as well. And then because the fact that, this is a difficult one, but because of the fact that the referee had the idea that the Springboks is always the one that's initiating the push, so the dominance actually played against the Springboks in this one, and then got themselves the penalty. And it is hard. It's very difficult and a really tough call here as well. So that again is something that's incredibly interesting, and I think that both teams will look at that over and over and over again in the post match reviews. I think the Springboks. Let's talk about some of the positives on the Springboks. Aside from the dominance, I thought the Springboks defense was absolutely outstanding. The rush defense, like this is something I talked about in my previous videos when the All Blacks played against the club teams. The All Blacks play champagne rugby in those games because the rush defense wasn't good enough, and it was shut. And they were given too much space to do some of those things. And in this game, the Springboks did really, really well for the majority of the game until basically at the end when things really started to fall apart, to shut down the space and not allow the All Blacks to play that champagne sort of rugby. pushing the All Blacks backwards. So that's something that they did really well. And the All Blacks, in terms of countering that rush defense, I thought that their goal, that the game plan was to go for the 50-22s out of Geordie Barrett. And for some reason, they didn't really do that, especially in the first half. They did that in the second half. Quinton Tupai actually kicked the 50-22. And again, I was expecting more of that, but they didn't, because that's kind of like how they, in my opinion, how they've been practicing to counter that rush defense. But they really failed to execute that for the majority of the game until the second half. But maybe when the fatigue kicked in, they had a bit more space to actually get the kicking on the boot and to finding those 50-22 attempts. And I think that's something that the All Blacks, really was under. I think the Springboks did really well to deny that opportunity, and the All Blacks was able to finally get that in the second half, and he paid off with those 50-22, especially that one was kicked by Quinton Tupai. And that's something that's that's again, it's been brewing for the All Blacks for quite some time. For the Springboks, the box kicking was once again outstanding. Cheslin Kobe was really just by far the best guy under the high ball. And then the problem with the All Blacks is, again, one of the big mistakes that the All Blacks played, especially in the first half, is playing the static kicking game, the Springbok style of static box kicking. Something that, again, the All Blacks look like they're transitioning out of that under Dave Rennie. So far this year, they've been doing a lot more dynamic kicking where the ball would have gone wider, and then, like I said, go for the 50-22. Even the up and under usually comes from Geordie Barrett, or recently has gone to Geordie Barrett, and we're just, the All Blacks just did not see that. They went back to the dynamic kicking, the box kicking like the Springboks, and it just really didn't work out for them. They didn't have the dominance under the high ball, and then and again, when the kick back from the Springboks, they had to set up to get a turnover more often than not, on their own ball. So it was just a losing game. And again, that is probably because the dynamic kicking, the dynamic kicking game that the All Blacks initially planned to play, probably because it couldn't be executed because of the rush defense. And they were just probably a bit too shallow. Probably just because, maybe a bit too shallow, and maybe just like the rush defense was just that good. Did such a good job to shut down that opportunity there as well. So there was so many things I think that the All Blacks had planned coming in, and the Springboks did an absolutely outstanding job in shutting those options down for the majority part of the game. And that is something that I think it's really, really impressive. How both teams executed their missions, studying the opposition prior to coming into this game, which was really, really good. The more I think the All Blacks much improved, the more defense, the discipline as well. The Springboks did get one more try, but I thought that the dominance was slightly favoring the Springboks. I was really worried this was just be like a blowout for the Springboks. So more was an improvement, but the scrum still can be improved, still can go up another level for the All Blacks, and I think the scrum is definitely needs something to be, cannot lose the scrum just because Enchase on the field, and then it is just going to be game over. I think the Springboks probably got a bit unlucky, didn't get a feed. They only got one feed, I think, when Enchase was on the field, where they could actually control the dominance of the scrum. Outside of that, it was just all Blacks feed, and then a lot of dominance was not paid off because the All Blacks just got the ball out very quickly. So this was just such a great game of rugby. I was so worried that the All Blacks was going to lose this one 4-0, and for just considering how tough it's been for a lot of the All Black fans, and I think I'm actually quite happy that they got this win, to be honest, because from the bottom of my heart, I don't want to see any of the Southern Hemisphere teams to just to just keep getting worse and worse and worse, and then financially and on the field, and then just letting the Northerners poaching more and more of our players, and slowly but surely bleed us out to death. And this win like this is really important for the New Zealand fans. We've got Rugby League encroaching. They're looking at starting another team in Christchurch, and a win like this is desperately needed on this part of the world, and to really shut down the onslaughts from the Northerners, the onslaughts from Rugby League, and just encroaching on the sport altogether. And I think this is something that, even if you're a Springbok fan, I think that you can just this is something that you should take comfort in knowing that it is for the better good, for the greater good, at least, right? So anyway, one last thing in terms of player preparation going to next 3 games. It's interesting because I'm pretty sure the Springboks team will probably be announced on Monday, because they all probably already selected the team that's going to be playing next weekend. And are they gonna still go for that game plan and play, play a different, play a completely different team next game? Make massive changes? I don't know. But Rasi has talked about managing players game time, and he thinks that the Springbok has an edge because they have fresher players go into the later rounds of this tour, because the All Blacks still got the Cats coming up on Tuesday, and they've already played way more times than the Springboks coming into even the first Test match. And I do think that the All Blacks had a bit of advantage in that sense as well, because they had more preparation, more consistency building into this first Test. Whereas I think the Springboks, with their fresher team, will be able to come back later in the series to get that more consistency going for them, and the fatigue will start playing against the All Blacks in the next couple of weeks or so. So anyway, let's talk about the match stats of the game. 341 run meters of the Springboks to the All Blacks 250. The Springboks has more run meters. 5 tries for the All Blacks. Let's just refresh that to make sure that's actually correct. That is crazy. 5 tries for the All Blacks. Uh-oh, what happened here? Come on. Uh-oh. Please don't crash on me. Did my internet just... What's going on? Come on. I'm not on dial-up, okay? I am not on dial-up. Oh my goodness. What's going on here? Oh, here we go. So yeah, let's quickly look at match stats. Yep, so Springbok has more run meters. 23 turnovers against the Springboks to the All Blacks 13. I do think that the All Blacks have struggled at the breakdown earlier in the game, and they managed to get themselves back in the game in the second half as well. 86 tackles of the Springboks, 26 missed tackles. All Blacks 132 tackles made, 20 missed tackles. So much better completion rate for the All Blacks there as well. Not too many kicking, 17 for the Springboks, 18 for the All Blacks. Kick meters, 528 for the All Blacks to Springboks, so it's 371. So most of the up and unders, and then this is probably a lot of this stuff from the second half for the 50-22 attempts with the space opened up for the All Blacks there as well. Yeah, really, really interesting there. And then we've got set play, 14 lineouts for the Springboks, only 1 loss. 3 lost against the throw for the All Blacks out of 11. Scrums, 3 scrums for the Springboks, not many feed there. If Springboks, like I said, like they really had more feed, this game could have gone the other way for the Springboks. 1 loss. All Blacks, 11 scrum feeds, 3 losses. Yeah, that's just a nightmare for all the props after the match. 10 penalties considered for the Springboks, 14 against the All Blacks, 2 yellow cards. I thought there might have been a different knock on from Mani Lebok as well from the scrum, but the referee let that go, so I'm happy with that. I don't want to see too many yellow cards get sent off for the match. Anyway, let's do a quick recap of the game. So there were some pretty interesting substitutions before I talk about the recap. The Springboks had 3 loose substitutions. So Botham, it's obviously Enche started, and then they had Wilco Low coming on as a loose head, and then they had Zachary. They had Stinnekamp coming on as loose head, and he only played like 20 minutes maybe, and then Vessels came on and taken off Stinnekamp in the second half. I'm not sure what's the idea there, Rassi, because if that's the case, you should have just gone for 2 forwards. You just have Vessels and then Portham, and you didn't have to have Stinnekamp on the bench, right? Because you just need 2 props. You don't need and Vessels can play hooker and prop, and I'm pretty sure you're allowed to do that. You just need 2 props. Do you need the extra hooker? But anyway, I guess you have an extra hooker because Van Staden's an extra hooker. You could play hooker, so you could potentially have Van Staden, Vessels, and then Portham, right? And then you can just get away with essentially two forward, 2 props, and have an extra loose forward on the bench. All right, so that's really interesting how they did that. And also they had some early injuries as well. So there was Esterhazen has come on early for Curry Alensa HIA, and Esterhazen was just outstanding. I love Esterhazen. I don't know why, but he's just, I don't know why, because one of my mates, his name is also Esterhazen. So I just think I don't know. I just feel like I know this guy for ages for some reason because his last name is Esterhazen. But anyway, and then they had Lebok coming on at 10, and then they have Sasha moving to 15, and then they had Esterhazen taken off, and they had Willemse moving to 12. which I thought was interesting. I thought, you know, Willemse has been, you know, I'm surprised they thought Esterhuizen couldn't handle playing an extra, you know, a full 80 minutes or something. I thought that was really surprising. That's really surprised me. It almost like they didn't think Esterhuizen could play the full 80 minutes. It wasn't like, you know, like 70 minutes. They had to take him off and shuffle Willemse to 12, which was, yeah, interesting. I thought it was interesting because Esterhuizen was really good at dominance and the rush defense, and I felt like, I am sorry, but I feel like Willemse's rush defense was just not quite there. Especially because Jesse Krill was pushed out to the wing, I think. No, Jesse Krill was pushed back to 12. So yeah, it was back to 13, sorry. It was a bit of a weird setup there for some of the substitutions there. But anyway, let's talk about the point summary of the game. Let's do it quickly for this one. So 5 minutes into the game, both team were going at it, and then Springboks said, that's enough. We'll take us 3 points. I thought this was fine because they did test the line out, but I thought they probably could have gone a bit more bolder before they're taking the 3. But, you know, it is a test match, and I think that Springboks usually takes the early 3. They like to do that anyway. 3 points to nil. The All Blacks, however, as we all expected, were not going to take the 3. They went for the line out, got the try 6 minutes in. There was a bunch of penalty offsides. They went for the line out more. Got close and crash ball. They went quickly switched to the blind side. Will Jordan goes in for the try. 5 points to 3 with a missed conversion. After this, 13 minutes in the game, Springboks had their own penalties. They built themselves into the 22. Didn't go for the 3 this time. The ball came out to Andre Esther. I think it was a scrum. No, it was more. There was a penalty advantage. The ball went out to Esterhuizen, just bumped over Josh Morby. Massive bump for the try. 10 points to 3. Springbok gets ahead. 23 minutes in the game. The All Blacks gets himself into a very rare opportunity. They were running out of their own half. The ball got massively thrown over the top to Tupavai on the wing. He was getting pushed out of the sideline. He popped the ball back in field to Josh Morby. Ran through for the try. 10 points to 12. All Blacks kicks ahead. 26 minutes of the game. There was a penalty scrum advantage to the Springboks, and they take the 3 points here. There was a tied hair win here as well. 13 points to 12. And just before half time, there was more scrum penalties for the Springboks that couldn't quite able to execute to get themselves, you know, the 3 points. They had the opportunity to kick the 3, but they didn't do it. So halftime score 13 points to 12. Second half starts, the Springboks once again. I think they wanted to get that number 17 sent off. More penalty advantages. They went for the scrum, couldn't quite get there, and then 45 minutes, the Springboks made their big mistake here. The All Blacks were under pressure. They wanted to get that penalty advantage, and then they wanted to get the 17 sent off. George Bauer sent off, and then they substituted on fresh props. They're taking off Enche, who's been dominating. They took off Enche, and then immediately they're taking the 3. And it was a long time before another scrum happened from after this. So yeah, this was they're taking the 3. They got the 16 points to 12 lead, and then this is another contentious point. 47 minutes. There was from this 3 points I was taken. There was a kickoff, and then Grant Williams was going for the box kick, and it was charged down by Fabian Holland. He went in for the try, scooped up the try, and this looks like he was maybe offside. But he didn't actually. So if you look at it, he didn't actually move. He actually didn't move his feet. His body swung forward, but he didn't actually move his feet. So he was actually okay, as long as you didn't step forward. So he was actually not offside. Timed it perfectly, in my opinion. You probably let me know if he was offside or not. After this one, the scrum actually got a bit worse for the Springboks. The All Blacks, you know, despite conceding some penalties, was able to get out of the jail for one of the scrums. And then, you know, they tried really hard. They couldn't quite get the yellow card for the All Blacks. They actually tied themselves up. And then I think that's probably why they made the substitution for Vessels and because they couldn't quite get for Wilco low, because they couldn't. They lost that dominance. Once Enche came off, they lost that dominance in the scrum, and that was the biggest problem. The biggest mistake I think they made. And finally, 57 minutes, as we saw just then, a yellow card for the All Blacks didn't call, and then a yellow card against I think it was Van Staden for playing the number 9 in the ruck, and then a yellow card immediately from the scrum call from the All Blacks for deliberate knock on from Reinach, and suddenly the Springboks down to 13. More scrums and then more lineouts. The All Blacks had Savea from the scrum picking up, went for the blind side. And then there was a quick crash ball for Luke Jacobson for the winning for the try, 16 points to 26. And then 68 minutes to Paya kicks a 50-22. And then oh sorry, the yellow card comes a bit later after this. But anyway, yellow card comes to 70 minutes. And then anyway, 74 minutes, the All Blacks was just 2 yellow cards on the board, 10 minutes left, running the clock down, exactly what we need to do. Scrum the Springboks could not score if they don't have the ball, and it could not score if they have no time. All Blacks control the time, and then eventually Ardie Savea went for the blindside again, almost like the previous play, but this time he's threw the ball over the top to Will Jordan, who ran in for the second try. 16 points to 33, the final score. Massive, massive win. Massive needed win for all of us here in the Southern Hemisphere. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next week for the Cats game. Cheers.